buzzing hot like the king is found. Broadcast the rays to the night so deep. Place bring the knowledge, no secrets.
Welcome back to the Bitcoin Collective podcast. That was that's not our theme tune. Write the theme tune, sing the theme tune. If anyone remembers that, I think that was Little Britain. But that I just made that. I was like, how can I start the show? The first one back, and I just put into one of the AI generators, write me a song about, in an old school hip hop vibe, like Biggie Smalls, about the return of the Bitcoin Collective podcast, and that's what it spat out. And yeah, it was pretty good. It's not bad. Well, yeah, welcome back, and this is essentially the reboot of the podcast, and I missed it. I really did. And I want to introduce myself. I'm going to start off. This podcast, or this episode, is all about like a little bit of the summary of how we got to where we are, why I'm back with a bang, and what to expect going forward. And then a little bit of input from everyone if you can be bothered to open your laptops and send me an email. But we are starting a quick summary for those who haven't listened before of how we got to where we are. So I started this podcast, way back like 2021 with my brother-in-law, Jim Duffy. And because we wanted to explore, at that time it was cryptocurrency, because it was called the crypto standard. And we wanted to explore it, but document it along the way. And it got really big, and then we kind of like realized, we should just be looking at Bitcoin. And it was always like America are doing this, America are doing that. We're always talking about that. And then we're like, well, the way I like to say it is we had a fuck it moment. And we were like, let's do a conference in the UK. And luckily we had a lot of sponsors that were listening to that episode that we had that fuck it moment. And they reached out to us and was like, yeah, we'll sponsor it. And then we had some of the most amazing guests come over. We had 30 speakers in the end. I think just over 550 people at this conference in Scotland. But going back to the podcast that started it all, how we done that was very different to how I feel like a lot of Bitcoin, crypto, finance podcasts are, is that it feels very serious. And I don't like that. Like, what we were good at is coming on and just saying how it is and like what we're experiencing. I'm trying to be way more relatable and not throwing around these fancy words and trying to like boost our egos. We were just saying how it is, and that's how we built the following for the podcast. Because we were hitting just over 5,000 listens per episode. So we were substantial back in the day, and then I stopped it. We've done the conference. We've now got a business. Jim isn't part of the company anymore, but that's not on bad terms. He was family, and it's very difficult. Working with family, as I know a lot of people have experienced. So then I was running the whole company, and we were launching education platform for Bitcoin. And I just kind of lost the love for podcasting, because I just felt like I was just another podcast, another Bitcoin podcast. And I hate that. I do not want to be that. So if at any point you feel like this show is becoming that, email me or DM me on socials and just be like, oh, Jordan, no, stop it. So many people over the past like 6 months have been loving our newsletter, and we've been growing that massively because it's quick. So what we do is we just take the headlines from that week in Bitcoin. We write a little bit about each one. And if you want to go deeper, you can go deeper, but it's built to skim. And that's what we're good at, is giving you the information short, sharp, and in a relatable way without being too financy bro. And it's more of a light-hearted approach rather than a doomsday down with everything. So the main reason that I brought this back is because I've got a problem. And that problem is I want a Bitcoin podcast that my friends, my family, those who I am introducing to Bitcoin, and those who want to find out more, where can they go? Where can they go? A podcast for that. Like, we've got an education platform for that, which works brilliantly for some people. But also, where can they consume information on the go? Can relate to it? And I was struggling because felt like it was a lot of complexity within a lot of podcasts. And that's not just in Bitcoin, that's in like finance in general. And I didn't want people to feel out their depth, because as soon as they feel out their depth, they're like, oh, okay, I'll listen to this for a little bit longer. If I don't quite get it by then I'm out. And it puts them off. I'm hoping that we can get back to where we were and be just relatable. I'll tell you how things are. We'll have guests on. And this is why I brought the podcast back, because I couldn't find this, I had a problem, and I'm creating the solution, or hopefully a solution. So what can you expect from the podcast going forward? So as I said, the last thing I want is to be just another podcast or just another Bitcoin podcast. So I'm going to cover Bitcoin, of course, and not talking too technical. Well, I can't talk technical because I'm not technical. That side doesn't excite me at all. What excites me is like, what are the pain points that people have in their lives at the moment, and then how does Bitcoin actually fix that? Or people are investing Bitcoin. Why are they investing in Bitcoin? And really just breaking down some of these things, but just make it way more relatable without all of that, without that jargon. But also, I'm just going to talk about things outside of Bitcoin as well, things that maybe influence Bitcoin, things I'm interested in, and I think you guys will be interested in as well. So it's not just going to be purely Bitcoin, Bitcoin, Bitcoin in your face, because that's not me. That's not me at all. And as I said, it's not going to be as you can tell, like, this is me. It's not going to be too serious, because a lot of finance things in general can seem really serious, and that's what puts people off. So how can I deliver that, communicate that in a way that people will actually listen and keep up with everything? One thing I like to call it, and I actually got this from Alex Hermonzi, is edutainment. So how can I educate, but through entertainment? And this is a thing that I say all the time is, yeah, people say that like education is key, but for me it's how you communicate that education, which is actually way more important. Because if I came on here and saying Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, it uses decentralization and distributed network, no, stop it. I'm not interested. That's not how I talk day to day. And I want to highlight, like, that's not how we talk. We have all got normal lives. So I'm not down for 3-hour podcasts. Don't expect that. My attention span will get me to an hour. 3 hours, I don't know how they do it. Fair play, hat off. They must have breaks in between them. I just get drained. I don't know how they're doing it. It baffles me. It absolutely baffles me. As I said, I'm shooting for edutainment, no techie stuff, and I want the occasional guest on, but not your the ones you see all the time. Or you might see some of them, but I'll ask them different questions. Maybe it's just not about Bitcoin. Like, I was thinking, like, some of these people, actually, let's take Jeff Booth, for example. Someone I look up to in the space, and I know in the space, in the Bitcoin space. What did he do before Bitcoin? I want to figure out more about that. I know his message, and I'm sure a lot of people know his message. If you haven't read his book, you can understand his message, which is The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth. Great book. But it's just finding out more, and not going in too deep, keeping it edutainment, and also not trying to be too polished. I think I fell into this trap. I fall into this trap now and again, is trying to be too polished, but where people just want relatable, I think. I'm saying people. I don't actually know. Do you want relatable? Maybe not. But trying a lot out there is trying to be way too polished and professional, and then that just puts a massive divide. This is me trying less and see if I can get more from it, rather than trying more and maybe getting less. So what I'll do is I'll cover a topic each week. I'll just pick a topic or have a guest on, and we will just shoot the shit, really, around Bitcoin. Make it way more relatable. As I said, like, I want friends, family, people new to Bitcoin or people in Bitcoin to listen in, keep up to date with Bitcoin, and maybe understand some new concepts that they haven't really thought about. Or I'll be bringing in different things, because I like to bring things that I've learned outside of Bitcoin into it and apply it there. For example, we will just talk about this one now, actually, is so MicroStrategy. A lot of people will know that MicroStrategy have been acquiring Bitcoin. So this is a company that Michael Saylor is exec chairman of, and I think they have around 250,000 Bitcoin. But if you read our newsletter, hint, hint, you'll notice that they're about to raise, or they're looking to raise another $42 billion to buy more Bitcoin over the next 3 years, which is mental, absolutely mental. But the way that I relate this is McDonald's. So McDonald's famously, their CFO famously said that the only reason I know all this off the top of my head is because I literally just done a masterclass for it on Genesis, the education platform. So there might be a few numbers that I just don't get quite right because I don't have notes for this. But anyway, MicroStrategy, why are they similar to McDonald's? Because McDonald's, their CFO said that we are not a food business, we are a real estate business. And you might not know that McDonald's are actually one of the biggest real estate companies in the world. So they've got $42 billion worth of real estate on their balance sheet. And this has allowed them to survive for just over 80 years, I think they've been going now, because it doesn't really matter too much about the fluctuation within the food, their products, their services. Obviously, these are very important, that's their core, but they've also got that safety net, and I call it a financial moat around their chain of restaurants. They've got all these assets, and as we know, assets are valuable and they appreciate over time if you pick the right ones. And this has allowed McDonald's to last for so long. And what they do with the real estate is they rent them out, that's the word. They rent them out to the franchisees, and then they get income back from that. And in 2023, they got, I think it was 36% of their total revenue for that year came from rental income. So they're making so much money from holding the asset, but also using that asset to get income. And this is very similar to what MicroStrategy are kind of planning. They want to be a Bitcoin bank. They are accumulating assets. Yes, they're not physical, they're intangible assets. So they're, in how Michael Saylor would say, in cyberspace. You can't touch them. But what they're doing is accumulating these assets and building that financial moat around their core products, which are MicroStrategy, some sort of techie company. Does anyone actually know what they do? Yeah, anyway, and that's very relatable for people to understand. So feel free to use that one if you want to. You might have not known that McDonald's owns so much real estate, or actually, if you want a good film, there's a film called The Founder, and this actually goes into a little bit of detail about it, and it's quite cool just seeing the story of McDonald's. That was a big tangent. This is kind of what the podcast is going to be like. When I come on, I'll just pick a topic and I'll roll with it. So, I mean, that's all I really wanted to say for this welcome one, this first one, is I'm happy to be back. I did miss it a lot. And I really think this is a gap that needs filled. We need, and I hope this fixes my problem, and maybe some of you have that same problem as well. And feel free to either drop me an email, post on X, DM on LinkedIn, whatever, with anything that you'd like to hear on the podcast, or maybe even any guests that you'd like to have on the podcast that are maybe a bit of a curveball. We like being different. I like being different. So this podcast, it used to be massive. Like, I think we were just behind, or not just behind, we were behind Peter McCormack in the UK as the biggest in the UK, and I'd like to get us there again. So thank you guys again for tuning in. Please share this, put it on socials, put it everywhere, because I really would like to get this back to where it was before, and I hope you guys like the new style, and a bit more informal and less polished. I think that's better. I think it's better. We'll find out. There's only one way to find out. Okay, thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.